I am Audrey Williams, 32 years old, and until last month, I would have done anything for my sister Natalie. We were always inseparable growing up, and I never imagined she would stand by while her husband Jack smashed my face into a wall and dislocated my shoulder. Her words still echo in my mind. "You should have signed the mortgage." All because I refused to be their guarantor for a house they could not afford. Our bedroom with floral wallpaper my mother picked out. Our secret language that confused our parents. Our dreams whispered under blanket forts. For years, my junior Natalie always looked up to me, and I took my big sister roles seriously. Whether defending her from playground bullies or helping her through her first heartbreak at 16. Our parents, Thomas and Eleanor, raised us to value family above all else. "Family is your foundation," Dad would say during our Sunday dinners. Mom would nod, adding, "When everything else falls apart, family remains." I internalized these values deeply, never imagining they would one day be weaponized against me. After college, I pursued nursing school while Natalie dropped out after 2 semesters, claiming it was not her thing. I supported her decision, believing everyone finds their path at different times. While I worked night shifts during my residency, studying between coffee breaks, Natalie bounced between retail jobs, never staying more than a few months at each. Despite our different approaches to life, we remained close. I would visit her apartment every Thursday for our tradition of homemade pasta and reality television. When she called at midnight, needing a ride after her car broke down, I would show up without question. When she needed $800 for rent after buying concert tickets instead of budgeting properly, I transferred the money immediately. That was what sisters did. I thought then Jack entered the picture 5 years ago. Natalie met him at a friend's wedding where he was tending bar. Tall with an easy smile and confident demeanor, Jack charmed everyone, including our parents. "He has such ambition," Mom commented after meeting him. Dad agreed, impressed by Jack's stories about real estate investments he planned to make. But something about Jack made me uneasy from our first meeting. Perhaps it was how his smile never reached his eyes when speaking to me, or how he would subtly correct Natalie in public, his hand gripping her arm just a little too tightly. "Babe, that is not what happened," he would say with a laugh that made others join in while Natalie's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. When Natalie called 8 months after meeting Jack to announce their engagement, I forced enthusiasm into my voice, while concern knotted my stomach. "Are you sure this is not too fast?" I asked carefully. "When you know, she responded, her voice higher than usual. "Plus, we found the perfect apartment and they need an answer by Friday." Their wedding was lavish, despite neither having substantial savings. Jack insisted on an open bar with top-shelf liquor and a 7-tier cake. Natalie wore a designer gown that cost more than my first car. I later discovered they had maxed out 3 credit cards to fund their dream wedding. As maid of honor, I gave a heartfelt speech, choking back my reservations. That night, Jack pulled me aside, his breath heavy with whiskey. "She always talked about how perfect her big sister is," he said, his grip painfully tight on my wrist. "Must be nice having everything figured out." Before I could respond, he laughed and rejoined the party, leaving me rubbing my wrist and increasingly worried about my sister's future. After their honeymoon, a pattern emerged. Jack would change jobs frequently, always with a story about management not recognizing his potential. Natalie quit working altogether, explaining that Jack wanted her focused on building their home. Meanwhile, social media showcased their extravagant lifestyle, designer clothes, expensive restaurants, weekend getaways to coastal resorts. The first time they asked for money was 3 months after their wedding. "Just a temporary setback," Natalie assured me while requesting $2,000 to cover their car payment. "Jack has a big commission coming next month." I transferred the money, never mentioning it again when they bought new living room furniture instead of repaying me. This pattern continued for years. Small loans became larger ones. Excuses grew more elaborate. The money never returned. My parents began expressing concern, especially when Natalie and Jack missed family gatherings because they were networking with important contacts that somehow never materialized into stable employment. Through it all, I maintained my nursing career, finding fulfillment in the emergency department despite the long hours and emotional toll. I saved carefully, built an emergency fund, and purchased a modest 2-bedroom condo that fit my needs perfectly. My life was stable, if unexciting, filled with 12-hour shifts, coffee with colleagues, and quiet evenings with my cat Jasper. Meanwhile, Jack and Natalie lived in a constant state of financial chaos, hidden beneath designer sunglasses and Instagram filters. When I suggested Natalie return to school or find employment during a sister lunch, her response was quick and defensive. Jack says focusing on appearances is important in his industry. Besides, we are about to make a major investment that will set us up for life. That major investment would soon become the breaking point in our relationship, shattering the bond I thought unbreakable and leaving me bleeding on my apartment floor while my own sister watched with cold, unrecognizable eyes. The Sunday everything changed began normally enough. I had worked an overnight shift and was looking forward to a quiet evening with leftover lasagna and the latest episode of my favorite medical drama. Then my doorbell rang unexpectedly at 6:30 in the evening. Natalie stood there with Jack, both dressed impressively. She in a new floral dress I recognized from a high-end boutique. He in a crisp button-down shirt and designer watch gleaming on his wrist. Surprise dinner, Natalie announced, holding up bags from an expensive Italian restaurant I could only afford on special occasions. We were in the neighborhood and thought, why not visit my favorite sister? Her smile seemed genuine, but something in her eyes looked calculated. Jack pushed past me into my apartment, already making himself comfortable on my couch. Nice place, Audrey. Cozy. The way he said cozy made it sound like an insult. During dinner, they shared stories about parties with people whose names they dropped, like currency weekend trips to lakeside cabins owned by connections and their growing social media following. I nodded politely, wondering when they would reveal the real purpose of their visit. It came over. Tiramisu casually inserted between compliments about my apartment. So, we have exciting news. Natalie began exchanging glances with Jack. We found our dream home.
Congratulations! Jack leaned forward, his cologne overwhelming in my small dining area. The thing is, with the current market, lenders want extra security. Just a formality, really. Natalie reached for my hand. We need a guarantor, odd, just your signature. You will not have to pay anything. The request hung in the air like a storm cloud. I carefully set down my four, a guarantor. That is a big commitment. How much is the mortgage? $850,000, Jack answered smoothly. But my commission structure is changing next quarter. We will be more than covered. My stomach tightened. That sounds like a lot. What do you both make annually right now? Natalie shifted uncomfortably while Jack's smile hardened. Our income is not the issue. The banks just want extra assurance in this economy. It is just paperwork. I would need to think about this, I said carefully. Research what being a guarantor actually means. Jack's expression darkened momentarily before he forced another smile. Of course, just do not take too long. We need to lock in our rate by next Friday. After they left, I spent hours researching mortgage guarantors. What I discovered alarmed me. As a guarantor, I would be legally responsible for their entire mortgage if they defaulted. My own credit and financial future would be tied to their ability to make payments on a house I had no ownership in. The next morning, I called Martin Green, a financial advisor I had consulted when purchasing my condo. His response was immediate and unequivocal. Absolutely not, Audrey. This would be financial suicide given what you have told me about their employment history. But they are family, I said weakly, already knowing in my gut what the right decision was. Family or not, co-signing a mortgage that large with their history would put everything you have worked for at risk, Martin explained patiently. Your nursing career, your savings, your own home, all could be jeopardized. Throughout the week, texts and calls from Natalie and Jack arrived with increasing frequency. Just checking in on your decision. The sellers are getting impatient. We might lose our dream home because of bureaucratic nonsense. By Thursday, the messages turned more emotional. I thought I could count on you, Natalie texted. After everything we have been through that weekend, our parents hosted their monthly family dinner. I arrived early to help Mom prepare the roast chicken and potatoes, her specialty since our childhood. Dad nearly choked on his coffee. That is more than 5 times what I paid for our house. Mom placed her hand over mine. Honey, you know we love Natalie, but this sounds excessive. What does Jack actually do now? Real estate development, apparently, I answered. But I have never seen any actual projects. When Natalie and Jack arrived, dinner quickly became tense. Jack dominated the conversation with vague references to high-level meetings and exclusive investment opportunities while repeatedly glancing at me with expectation. When Dad asked straightforward questions about their income and savings, Jack deflected with practiced ease. After dessert, Natalie cornered me in the kitchen. "Have you made a decision? The sellers need an answer by Monday." Taking a deep breath, I gave her the answer I had rehearsed. "I cannot do it, Nat. The financial risk is too high for me. If something happened and you could not make payments, I would be responsible for an $850,000 loan." Her face hardened in a way I had never seen before. "So, you're precious. Credit score matters more than helping your sister, is that it?" "It is not about my credit score," I tried explaining. "It is about not taking on a massive debt that could bankrupt me if anything went wrong." "Nothing will go wrong," she snapped. "Jack's career is taking off. This house is our foot in the door with the right people. Then why do you need a guarantor? If his career is so solid, the bank should approve you without one." She had no answer for that, storming out of the kitchen to whisper intensely with Jack in the corner of the living room. They left abruptly afterward, Natalie not even hugging our parents goodbye, something she had never done before. The next morning I made the dreaded call. Jack answered immediately, as if waiting for it. "Jack, I have thought carefully about this, and I cannot be your mortgage guarantor. I hope you understand this is a financial decision, not a personal one." Silence filled the line for several seconds before his voice came through eerily calm. "You know Audrey family should support each other. This feels like betrayal. I support you both in many ways, but this is asking too much. Perhaps you could look at homes more within your price range. Do not tell us how to live our lives," he snapped, his calm facade cracking. "Natalie was right about you. Always thinking you are better than everyone else with your responsible job and your modest little condo." The call ended abruptly, leaving me shaking, but convinced I had made the right decision. Little did I know that this refusal would trigger a chain of events culminating in violence I never imagined possible from someone I had broken bread with countless times. The week following my refusal became increasingly uncomfortable. What began as disappointed texts from Natalie evolved into something more sinister. Jack sent messages that walked the line between guilt, tripping, and threatening. "Hope you sleep well, knowing you destroyed your sister's dreams." Read one message that arrived at 3 o'clock in the morning. "People remember who turned their back on them when they needed help," said another. Natalie's communications were equally manipulative, but focused more on our history. "Remember when I stayed with you in the hospital after your appendectomy? I guess that loyalty only went one way." I tried explaining my position again via email, attaching articles about the risks of being a mortgage guarantor, but this only escalated their responses. "We do not need your financial literacy lessons," Jack replied. "We need your signature, period." The situation began affecting my work. As an emergency department nurse, I needed complete focus, but found myself distracted during critical procedures. After nearly administering the wrong dosage to an elderly patient, my supervisor, Olivier, pulled me aside. "Audrey, you have always been one of our most reliable nurses. What is going on?" I broke down, explaining the situation through tears in the break room. Olivia listened carefully before offering both sympathy and practical advice. "You made the right financial decision," she assured me, "but you might want to document these messages. They sound increasingly hostile." The following Sunday, our parents' traditional family dinner became a battleground. Natalie and Jack arrived late, interrupting Dad's grace with their dramatic entrance. Throughout the meal, Jack made pointed comments that landed like small daggers. "Did you know," he announced while passing the potatoes, "that some cultures consider refusing to help family the ultimate dishonor?" Mom attempted to change the subject several times, but Jack persistently brought the conversation back to family loyalty and supporting each other's dreams. When Dad finally suggested they consider a more affordable home, Jack's response was chilling. "With all due respect, sir, some people are content with mediocrity. Others reach for more." His eyes locked with mine across the table, "and some pretend to care about family while stabbing them in the back." After dinner, I confided in my best friend Elaine over coffee at her apartment. A corporate
attorney with a nonsense attitude. Elaine had always been suspicious of Jack. "This is getting into harassment territory," she warned after scrolling through the messages on my phone. "You need to establish clear boundaries, and honestly, you might want to consider blocking them temporarily." "They are still family," I protested weakly. "Family does not treat you this way," Elaine countered. These messages are intimidation tactics. The situation escalated further when Jack showed up at St. Mary's Hospital during my shift 3 days later. I was inserting an IV when a colleague tapped my shoulder. There is a man at the nurse's station making a scene. Says he is your brother-in-law and needs to speak with you immediately. My heart pounding. I finished with my patient before approaching the station where Jack stood looking out of place in an expensive suit amid the clinical environment. This is my workplace, I hissed, pulling him toward the waiting area. You cannot just show up here. You have been ignoring our calls? He replied loudly enough for others to hear. We need an answer about the house. The sellers are giving us one more day. I already gave you my answer. It is no. Now, please leave before I have to call security. His face contorted with anger. You think you are so perfect with your stable job and your sensible choices. You have no idea what your sister deserves. Security did end up escorting him out, leaving me humiliated in front of my colleagues and supervisor. Olivia suggested I take the rest of the day off, concerned about my shaking hands and the distress evident on my face. The following evening, while walking to my car after a late shift, I noticed a familiar vehicle idling in the hospital parking lot. Jack's silver BMW. He did not approach, but watching me from inside his car engine, running lights off, a clear intimidation tactic. I took a different route home, checking my rear view mirror repeatedly to ensure I was not being followed. That night, I began documenting everything. Screenshots of texts, times and dates of calls. Descriptions of incidents like the hospital confrontation and parking lot stalking. Elaine had convinced me that if things continued escalating, I might need evidence for a restraining order. The breaking point came 3 days later. My phone rang at 9:15 in the evening. As I was preparing for an early shift the next day, Natalie's name flashed on the screen. Audrey, her voice sounded strange, tight with an emotion I could not identify. Jack is really angry about the house. We lost it because of the financing falling through. I am sorry to hear that, I said cautiously. He is coming to talk to you. He just left. I tried to stop him, but a chill ran through me. What do you mean coming to talk to me, Natalie? If he is angry, he should not be coming here. Just listen to what he has to say. Okay. It is important to him. To us. The line went dead. Less than 15 minutes later, aggressive knocking pounded against my door. Not the knock of someone paying a friendly visit, but the forceful pounding of rage. Through the peephole, I saw Jack, his face contorted, shoulders tense. Open the door, Audrey. I know you are in there. More pounding hard enough to rattle the hinges. I considered calling the police immediately, but hesitated, worried about escalating the situation further. Maybe I could reason with him, calm him down, make him understand my position one final time. That moment of hesitation would prove to be a devastating mistake. Jack, I need you to calm down before we talk. I called through the door, my phone in hand. 911 already dialed, but not yet called. Open this goddamn door right now. His voice was distorted with rage, almost unrecognizable from the charming man who had first entered my sister's life 5 years earlier. Against my better judgment, I unlatched the security chain, but kept the door only partially open, thinking the compromise might diffuse his anger. We can talk, but you need to lower your voice. My neighbors will call security. That narrow opening was all he needed. Jack slammed his shoulder against the door with such force that it flew open, knocking me backward onto the entryway floor. My phone skidded across the hardwood. The emergency call never completed. He was on me before I could scramble to my feet, grabbing my upper arm with bruising force. You think you are so much better than us do. Not you, little Miss Perfect, with her nursing degree and her financial responsibility. Jack, you are hurting me. Please stop. I tried to keep my voice calm despite the terror rising in my chest. Hurting you? You cost us our dream home. Do you have any idea what you have done? His face was inches from mine, spittle flying from his mouth as he shouted. I attempted to twist away, but his grip tightened as he dragged me further into my apartment. The sellers accepted another offer, all because my stuck-up sister-in-law thought she was too good to help family. I could not take on that financial risk, I explained desperately. It was too much money. Something in his eyes changed, then a final thread of restraint snapping. Too much money. Too much money. His voice rose to a roar as he grabbed my shoulders, lifting me slightly before slamming me against the wall. My head hit the drywall with enough force to leave a crater pane exploding across my skull. Before I could recover, He grabbed my hair and smashed my face directly into the wall. I felt rather than heard the crunch as my nose broke, warm blood immediately cascading down my face and onto my shirt. "Jack, stop!" I screamed, tasting blood as it ran into my mouth. "Please." Instead of stopping, he wrenched my arm behind my back, twisting it upward at an unnatural angle. The pop of my shoulder dislocating was accompanied by pain so intense that my vision momentarily went white. I screamed again, a primal sound of agony that I did not recognize as my own voice. Through my tears and the blood clouding my vision, I saw movement at my open door. Natalie stood there watching, her expression unreadable. "Nat," I gasped, certain my sister would intervene, would stop this madness. "Help me, please." But she remained in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest. "You should have signed the mortgage, Audrey." Her words hit harder than Jack's physical blows. My own sister watching my assault, blaming me for it. In that moment, something fundamental broke between us, something no apology could ever fully repair. Jack released my dislocated arm, letting me crumple to the floor. But he was not finished. He began systematically destroying my apartment, sweeping books from shelves, overturning furniture, smashing framed photos against walls. "This is what happens when you betray family," he snarled, picking up a ceramic vase my mother had given me for Christmas, and hurling it against the kitchen backsplash where it shattered into countless pieces. I attempted to crawl toward the door, leaving a trail of blood on my cream-colored carpet, but a sharp kick to my ribs stopped my progress. The pain was blinding, making it impossible to breathe for several terrifying seconds. Natalie finally spoke again. "We should go." The neighbors probably heard. Jack stood over me, breathing heavily, looking at what he had done with no sign of remorse. "Remember this the next time you think about refusing to help your sister." They left together. Natalie stepping carefully around the blood on the floor, not looking back at me. The door remained open, cool evening air flowing in over my battered body. I lay there for several minutes, or perhaps longer time, becoming meaningless through waves of pain. My face throbbed, my shoulder screamed with agony, and each breath brought sharp pain from what I suspected were cracked ribs. Blood continued flowing from my nose, pooling beneath my cheek on the floor. Survival instinct eventually pushed through the fog of pain and shock. My parents lived only 2 blocks away. If I could reach them, I would be safe. Jack and Natalie would not expect me to go there. Might assume I would remain in my apartment until morning. Getting to my feet was an exercise and suffering every movement, sending fresh waves of agony through my body. My dislocated right arm hung uselessly at an unnatural angle. Blood continued dripping from my face, leaving a makeup trail as I stumbled toward the door. The hallway was mercifully empty as I made my way to the elevator, leaning heavily against the wall for support. Each step felt like a marathon, each breath a struggle against the pain in my ribs. The elderly neighbor in apartment 412 opened his door as I passed, his eyes widening in horror. "Should I call an ambulance?" he asked, already reaching for his phone. "No," I gasped, irrationally afraid that Jack might return, might find me still in the building. Parents nearby outside. The cool night air made me gasp, the sudden temperature change, intensifying the pain in my face. 2 blocks had never seemed so far. I focused on putting one foot in front of the other, staying in shadows, terrified of encountering Jack's silver BMW, returning to finish what he started. Blood dripped steadily onto the sidewalk as I walked, marking my path like breadcrumbs in a dark fairy tale. By the time I reached my parents' street, my vision was tunneling consciousness, becoming slippery and uncertain. Their porch light was on a beacon of safety in my darkening world. I managed 3 steps up their walkway. Before my legs finally gave out, I crawled the rest of the way one-armed, leaving bloody handprints on their immaculate concrete path. With my last reserves of strength, I reached up to press the doorbell, then collapsed on their welcome mat. The irony of those cheerful words, not lost even in my semi-conscious state. The last thing I remember before darkness claimed me was my mother's scream as she opened the door and found her eldest daughter bleeding and broken on her doorstep. I drifted back to consciousness in fragments like pieces of a broken mirror reflecting distorted images. Bright lights, urgent voices, the metallic taste of blood, the nauseating movement of a stretcher being loaded into an ambulance. My father's hand gripping mine, his voice breaking as he promised. "You are safe now, Audrey. We are here." The emergency room was familiar territory, but never from this side of the experience. As a nurse, I had treated countless victims of assault, had documented their injuries with clinical detachment, while offering quiet sympathy. Now I was the one having injuries, catalogued my battered face, photographed my dislocated shoulder, manipulated back into its socket under sedation, facial fractures to the orbital floor and nasal bones. I heard someone say, recognizing the professional tone used when patients are presumed unconscious or sedated. Dislocated right shoulder with possible labral tear. 3 cracked ribs, concussion, extensive contusions. When I fully regained consciousness, Detective Lisa Thompson was already waiting to take my statement. Petite with prematurely gray hair cropped close to her head, she had the focused intensity of someone who had seen humanity at its worst, but retained her compassion. "Take your time, Miss Williams," she said, her notebook open, but temporarily ignored as she assessed my condition. "I know this is difficult." I recounted everything, my voice from screaming and the intubation during shoulder reduction. Detective Thompson documented each detail methodically, her expression remaining professional, except for a slight tightening around her eyes when I described Natalie's presence and words. "Your sister witnessed the entire assault," she confirmed, looking up from her notes. "Yes," I whispered. The betrayal still incomprehensible, despite the physical evidence of it mapped across my body. "She watched and told me I should have signed the mortgage papers." Detective Thompson shook her head slightly. The first crack in her professional demeanor, in 15 years on the force family betrayal, still manages to shock me. She explained the process of filing charges, the likelihood of arrest, the steps toward a protection order. Words like aggravated assault battery and witness testimony floated around me, important but somehow distant, as if happening to someone else. My parents had been waiting outside during the interview, and when permitted to enter, they appeared to have aged years and hours. Mom's eyes were swollen from crying. Dad's normally confident posture collapsed into something fragile and uncertain. "The police are looking for Jack now," Dad said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "Your sister is not answering her phone." As if summoned by his words, Natalie appeared in the doorway of my hospital room, looking remarkably composed, given the circumstances. No bloodstains marked her expensive blouse. No guilt shadowed her eyes as she surveyed my injuries. "I need to speak with my sister alone," she announced to the room. Not a request, but a demand. Detective Thompson stood positioning herself slightly between Natalie and my bed. "That is up to Miss Williams." I nodded weakly, curious, despite myself, about what possible justification Natalie could offer. Once alone, my sister approached the bed cautiously, as if I were the dangerous one. "Jack has been arrested," she stated flatly. "This has all gotten out of hand." Out of hand. The words emerged as a pained whisper through my swollen lips. "He tried to kill me, Natalie, and you watched. Do not be dramatic. He lost his temper, yes, but he never meant to seriously hurt you." She adjusted her designer purse strap, a nervous gesture I recognized from childhood. "You could drop the charges. We could handle this as a family." The medication dulling my physical pain could not touch the anguish of this moment. "Why are you defending him? How can you possibly justify what he did to me? You do not understand the pressure we have been under." She countered, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her voice. "That house was everything to us. Our future, our chance to finally be somebody. So that justifies assaulting me, breaking my face, dislocating my shoulder?" "Of course not," but she trailed off, looking at her manicured nails rather than my battered face. "You always think you know better than everyone else. Always so perfect, so responsible. Audrey, maybe for once you needed to see that your choices affect other people." The morphine drip could not dull the shock of her words. The realization that my sister, the little girl I had protected and loved all my life, was essentially suggesting I deserved the violence inflicted upon me. "I think you should leave," I said quietly. "The police are being ridiculous about this whole thing," she continued, as if I had not spoken. "Acting like Jack is some kind of hardened criminal. He is. What he did to me was a felony, Natalie. Multiple felonies." She finally looked at me directly, her expression hardening. "If you go through with this, it will destroy our family. Mom and Dad will be forced to choose sides. Jack already destroyed our family when he attacked me in my own home. You destroyed it when you stood by and watched." Detective Thompson returned then, perhaps having monitored the conversation from outside. "I think that is enough for now," she said firmly to Natalie. "Miss Williams needs rest." After Natalie left, my parents returned their expressions, conveying their struggle to reconcile their daughter's conflicting versions of reality. Mom kept touching my hand gently, as if to reassure herself I was still there. Dad paced the small room, his emotions cycling visibly between rage and heartbreak. "We should have seen this coming," he said finally, stopping at the foot of my bed. The way Jack controlled her isolated her from her friends, the financial irresponsibility. "We should have intervened sooner." "This is not your fault," I assured him, though part of me wondered if we had all enabled Jack's behavior by overlooking red flags for years. The next morning, a hospital social worker named Maria visited, bringing information about domestic violence resources. "I know he was not your partner," she clarified, "but the dynamics of power and control are similar in many family violence situations." She left pamphlets about victim advocacy services, trauma counseling, and legal assistance. One organization's name, Survivors Rising, stood out, its simple logo of a phoenix emerging from ashes, speaking to something deep within me. The protective order was granted almost immediately. The judge's expression grim as he reviewed the photographs of my injuries and the medical report. Jack was prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. Violating the order would result in immediate arrest. The initial court hearing was scheduled with surprising speed, perhaps due to Detective Thompson's involvement. I arrived with my parents, my arm in a sling, my face still swollen and discolored despite the week that had passed since the assault. Jack appeared with an attorney in an expensive suit that matched his own, both projecting an image of respectability that contradicted the violence documented in my medical records. Natalie sat behind them, her expression unreadable. His attorney attempted to paint the incident as a regrettable family disagreement that escalated rather than the premeditated attack. It was, "My client has no prior criminal record and is deeply remorseful about this unfortunate incident." Jack nodded solemnly at these words, his performance of contrition so convincing that for a moment I questioned my own memories of that night. Had I somehow provoked this? Had I misremembered the cold calculation in his eyes as he systematically broke my body? Then I caught sight of Detective Thompson, watching him with the experienced skepticism of someone who had seen this performance before. Her slight headshake in my direction grounded me back in reality. This was not my fault. His violence was not my responsibility. The judge set a trial date and maintained the conditions of the protective order, unmoved by the defense attorney's arguments for leniency. As we left the courtroom, I noticed Natalie hurrying to catch up with Jack and his attorney, not once looking in my direction. "Give her time," Mom said, noticing my gaze. "She has been under his influence for years. This kind of control does not break easily." But as I watched my sister choose her abusive husband over her assaulted sister for the second time, I wondered if there were some betrayals from which no relationship could recover. 2 weeks after the initial hearing, I attended my first meeting at Survivors Rising, housed in a nondescript building with security cameras and buzzer entry. The group was small, just 8 women seated in a circle, their experiences of violence etched in their expressions, if not their bodies. The facilitator, Grace, was a survivor herself, her left arm ending just below the elbow. The result, she later told me of her ex-husband's attack with a machete. "Healing is not linear," she explained at the beginning of the session. "Some days you move forward, some days you just survive. Both are victories." I listened more than I spoke that first meeting, absorbing stories that echoed elements of my own experience. The disbelief, the self-doubt, the betrayal by those who should have protected them. When I finally shared my story, voice trembling despite my determination to remain composed, the understanding in their eyes was a balm I had not known I needed. "Your sister's reaction is unfortunately common," Grace explained afterward. "Sometimes those closest to the situation are the most invested in denying its reality. Acknowledging what happened to you would force her to confront her own choices, her own relationship." Through the group, I met Sarah Knowles, an attorney who specialized in domestic violence cases, and often took clients pro bono. Small but fierce, with bright red hair and a prosecutorial intensity, she offered to review my case. "The district attorney is handling the criminal charges," I explained during our consultation in her cluttered office. "Yes, but victims often benefit from additional legal support," Sarah countered, already flipping through my police report with practiced efficiency. "The criminal justice system focuses on punishing the perpetrator, not necessarily on protecting or supporting the victim." With Sarah's guidance, I began building a comprehensive case beyond the criminal charges. We documented the escalating pattern of intimidation before the assault, gathered text messages and voicemails, and even secured security footage from my apartment. building showing Jack's aggressive entry and Natalie's arrival. Most surprisingly, through Sarah's network of domestic violence advocates, we discovered I was not Jack's first victim. 2 ex-girlfriends had previously filed police reports against him in different counties, though charges had been dropped in both cases after the women relocated. This establishes a pattern, Sarah explained, organizing these revelations into our growing file. It demonstrates that this was not a one-time loss of control, but consistent behavior. Meanwhile, my physical recovery progressed slowly. The facial fractures healed, though a slight asymmetry remained around my left eye socket. Physical therapy for my shoulder was excruciating, but necessary. The joints still prone to dislocating with certain movements. Nightmares became regular visitors, replaying the assault with various endings, some worse than reality. Throughout this period, Natalie made several attempts to contact me, her messages evolving from defensive. "You are tearing the family apart," to pleading. "We need to talk this through," to manipulative. "Mom and Dad are devastated by this division." I maintained the boundary of no direct communication, forwarding each message to Sarah for documentation. My parents found themselves in an impossible position trying to support both daughters through vastly different crises. Mom would bring food to my apartment, helping with household tasks while my shoulder healed. Dad installed a security system with cameras and reinforced locks, his way of protecting me. When he could not during the assault, Natalie called again. Mom would say, sometimes her expression pained, "She says Jack is getting counseling. That is good for him." I would reply neutrally, "But it does not change what happened." As the trial date approached, the intimidation tactics began. Mutual friends reported Jack asking pointed questions about my schedule, my activities. Anonymous calls came in the middle of the night, nothing but breathing on the other end. A former colleague spotted Jack driving slowly past the hospital during my shift despite the restraining order. Sarah documented each incident meticulously. "This shows consciousness of guilt," she noted. "If he truly believed he was justified or that it was a simple misunderstanding, he would not be trying to intimidate you." Now, 2 days before the trial, my doorbell rang. Through the new security camera, I saw Natalie standing alone. No sign of Jack nearby. Against my better judgment, I buzzed her up, meeting her in the hallway rather than allowing her into my apartment. She looked thinner than when I had last seen her, dark circles underlining her eyes. "We need to talk, Audrey. This has gone too far." "The trial is in 2 days, I replied, maintaining distance between us. "Anything you say to me now could be considered witness tampering." "He made a mistake," she pleaded. "One terrible mistake. Does he deserve to have his life ruined because of it? Does he deserve to face consequences for breaking my face, dislocating my shoulder, and cracking 3 of my ribs?" "Yes, Natalie, he does. What about me?" Her voice cracked slightly. "He is my husband. What am I supposed to do if he goes to prison?" The question hung between us, heavy with implications. What she was really asking was, who am I without him? What is my value outside of this relationship? Questions I had hoped my sister would never need to confront. "You could start by telling the truth," I said finally. "About what you saw that night, about who Jack really is." She flinched as if I had struck her. "I cannot testify against my husband." "Actually, you can. There is no spousal privilege for cases where one spouse witnessed the other commit a violent crime against a third party." Her expression hardened, the vulnerability of moments ago disappearing behind a familiar mask of defiance. "I will not help you destroy my marriage." "Jack destroyed your marriage when he decided to assault your sister," I replied, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "I am just making sure he cannot hurt anyone else." The trial itself was both more and less dramatic than I had anticipated. The clinical recitation of my injuries by medical professionals, the methodical presentation of evidence by the prosecutor. Jack's continued performance of remorse undermined by the documented pattern of intimidation leading up to the trial. When my turn came to testify, I focused on Detective Thompson's supportive presence in the courtroom rather than Jack's cold stare or Natalie's averted eyes. I recounted that night in detail, my voice occasionally faltering but never breaking. "And what did your sister say when she witnessed the assault?" the prosecutor asked. "She said, 'You should have signed the mortgage, Audrey,'" I replied, the words still painful to repeat. "And what did you understand that to mean?" "That she believed I deserved what was happening to me because I refused to be their mortgage guarantor." The defense attorney attempted to paint me as financially controlling, suggesting I had deliberately sabotaged my sister's dreams out of jealousy. Is it not true that you have always been the responsible sister? The one with the steady job and the sensible decisions? I have worked hard for what I have, I answered carefully. That does not make me responsible for financing my sister's lifestyle beyond my means. The trial's unexpected turning point came during Natalie's testimony. Called as a witness for the defense, she was expected to minimize the assault, perhaps suggest I had provoked Jack, or that his actions were less severe than claimed. Instead, something shifted as she took the oath. Perhaps it was seeing the evidence laid out so clearly. Or maybe the weight of the lie had finally become too heavy. When asked to describe what she had witnessed that night, Natalie looked at me directly for the first time since entering the courtroom. He was out of control, she said quietly, ignoring her husband's widening eyes. He smashed her face into the wall repeatedly. Her shoulder, the sound it made when it dislocated. She swallowed hard. I have never heard my sister scream like that. And what did you do while this was happening? The prosecutor asked gently. Tears filled Natalie's eyes. Nothing. I did nothing. I stood there and watched. And then I told her she should have signed the mortgage papers. Her voice broke. Who does that? What kind of person watches her sister being assaulted and blames her for it? The defense attorney attempted to redirect, but the damage was done. Natalie's unexpected honesty had punctured any remaining sympathy for Jack among the jury members. The verdict came swiftly, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Jack to 5 years in prison with 3 years probation following release and a permanent restraining order protecting me and my family. As he was led away in handcuffs, Jack's carefully maintained facade finally cracked, revealing the rage that had always lurked beneath his charming exterior. In the courthouse hallway afterward, Natalie approached hesitantly, her expression raw with conflicting emotions. I do not expect forgiveness, she said, twisting her wedding ring. I just wanted you to know I have filed for divorce and I am getting help. Therapy. I am glad, I replied honestly. The anger was still there, the betrayal still fresh. But beneath it all remained the echo of the little sister I had once protected from all harm. Except ironically the harm she had invited into her own life. Maybe someday, she began, then stopped herself. No, I will not ask for that. You deserve better, you always did. As she walked away, shoulders squared, with new resolve, I wondered if this was truly the beginning of her healing or simply another performance. Only time would reveal which sister I had really spoken to that day. The authentic Natalie emerging from Jack's shadow or the manipulated version still playing her part in his ongoing drama. Physical recovery followed a predictable timeline, 6 weeks for the facial fractures to heal completely, 3 months of physical therapy before my shoulder regained most of its range of motion. The visible bruises faded from purple to green to yellow before disappearing altogether. Though certain movements still triggered phantom pain, my body remembering what my conscious mind tried to forget. The emotional healing proved far less linear. Nightmares invaded my sleep for months, vivid recreations of the assault that left me gasping awake, sheets soaked with sweat. Unexpected sounds. A door slamming, glass breaking could trigger paralyzing flashbacks transporting me instantly back to that night. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a normal response to abnormal events, explained Dr. Winters, the trauma therapist I began seeing weekly. Your brain is trying to process something that defies normal understanding. Through therapy, I learned techniques to ground myself during flashbacks to recognize triggers before they overwhelmed me. Breathing exercises, meditation, writing exercises that helped externalize the tangled emotions that sometimes threatened to suffocate me from within. You are experiencing a form of complicated grief, Dr. Winters observed during one session. Not just for your physical safety, but for the relationship with your sister, the family dynamic you once had. This framework helped me understand the waves of emotion that sometimes crashed over me without warning. The rage at Jack for his violence, the deeper betrayal of Natalie's complicity, the grief for the sister I had loved and lost not to death, but to a slow poison that had transformed her into someone unrecognizable. 3 months after the trial, I moved to a new apartment in a secured building across town. My parents helped pack my belongings carefully, wrapping framed photos and kitchen items in newspaper. We did not discuss the real reasons certain items were not coming with me. The coffee table Jack had overturned, the lamp he had shattered, anything that might trigger memories of that night. My relationship with my parents evolved during this period. Initially, they had tried to maintain neutrality, supporting both daughters through their respective crises. But as Natalie's divorce proceedings revealed more about Jack's controlling behavior and financial deceptions, they began to understand the full scope of what had happened. "We should have seen it sooner," Dad said one evening as we shared pizza in my new living room. Still sparsely furnished, but already feeling more like home than my old apartment ever would again. The way he isolated her, controlled the narrative. Classic abuser tactics. We all missed it, I acknowledged. Or saw pieces. But not the whole picture. Mom reached for my hand, her expression troubled. "Natalie says he started pressuring her to cut contact with you long before the mortgage situation. Said you were a negative influence because you questioned their lifestyle." This revelation was not entirely surprising but still painful. "Did she tell you that before or after the assault?" After Mom admitted she is sharing a lot now in therapy, things she was afraid to say before. The cautious reconciliation with Natalie began with supervised visits in our parents' home. Awkward conversations about neutral topics, the careful avoidance of certain subjects. The weight of unspoken history hanging between us like an invisible wall. During one such visit, while our parents were in the kitchen preparing dinner, Natalie finally addressed the elephant in the room. "I keep trying to understand why I did nothing that night," she said quietly. "Why I stood there while he hurt you. I had wondered this myself countless times. What answers have you found?" My therapist calls it traumatic bonding. Years of subtle control, isolation, emotional manipulation. She twisted her hands in her lap. "Wedding ring, now absent. But that feels like an excuse. The truth is, I was afraid, not just of him, but of what my life would become without him. Who I would be." It was the most honest conversation we had shared in years, perhaps ever. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a small crack in the wall between us, allowing a thin beam of understanding to shine through. The first anniversary of the assault arrived with unexpected emotional intensity. I took the day off work, expecting to need space for difficult feelings to surface. Instead, I found myself volunteering at Survivors Rising, the organization that had provided community during my darkest days, working alongside other survivors, assembling care packages for women newly escaped from violent situations. I found a sense of purpose that transcended my personal trauma. Each toiletry kit, each handwritten note of encouragement represented what I had needed in those early days. Tangible proof that healing was possible, that survival could eventually transform into something more. This volunteer work gradually expanded into more formal advocacy. I began speaking at community events about domestic violence, using my professional background as a nurse to address the healthcare system's role in identifying and supporting victims. Each presentation became slightly easier than the last. My personal story, transforming from an open wound into a tool for education and change. My professional life shifted as well. After 6 months back in the emergency department, I transferred to community health nursing. Finding greater fulfillment in preventative care and patient education, the pace was less frenetic, the emotional demands different, but equally meaningful. "You seem more at peace with this work," Olivia observed during a coffee meet, months after I had left her department. "I am," I agreed. "In the ER, we treat the crisis here. I might help prevent it from happening in the first place." Financial boundaries became a non-negotiable aspect of all my relationships moving forward. The painful lesson of the mortgage request had permanently altered my approach to money and family obligations. I established clear rules for myself. I would give only what I could afford to lose. I would never again compromise my financial security for someone else's dreams. I would recognize that sometimes the most loving response to a request is no. Natalie seemed to understand this boundary better than anyone, never asking for financial assistance, even when struggling to rebuild her life post-divorce. Instead, she focused on developing her own independence, returning to community college, and securing a part-time job that allowed her to support herself modestly but completely. Our relationship would never return to the uncomplicated closeness of childhood. But something new began to emerge. A more honest connection built on respect rather than obligation, on choice rather than mere biological ties. 2 years after the assault, I received an unexpected letter from Jack sent from prison through his attorney. I considered burning it unread, but curiosity prevailed. "I accept full responsibility for my actions," he wrote in precise handwriting. "The anger management and therapy programs here have helped me understand the patterns of control and violence that led to my assault on you. I do not expect or deserve forgiveness, but wanted you to know I am committed to ensuring I never harm another person as I harmed you." I shared the letter with Dr. Winters during our now monthly therapy session. Do you believe him? She asked, without judgment. I do not know, I answered honestly, and more importantly, it does not matter. My healing is not dependent on his reformation. This realization was perhaps the most profound lesson of my journey. That my worth was not defined by what had happened to me, nor by how others treated me. That boundaries were not selfish, but necessary. That family loyalty should never require the sacrifice of personal safety or financial security. When people ask me now how I survived such a profound betrayal, I tell them the truth, that survival happens one day at a time, one breath at a time. That healing is not the absence of pain, but the integration of it into a larger story. That forgiveness, if it comes at all, is not about excusing the inexcusable, but about freeing yourself from the burden of ongoing resentment. The scars remain, some visible, others hidden. My shoulder still aches before rainstorms. Certain phrases or gestures can still trigger momentary panic. But these are no longer the defining features of my existence. They are simply part of my story threads in a larger tapestry that includes joy, purpose, and hard-won wisdom. If you have stayed with me through this story, perhaps you have experienced your own version of betrayal or violence, or know someone who has. I hope you understand that setting boundaries is not selfish but essential, that family love should never require endangering your financial security or physical safety. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones? How did you navigate that challenging terrain? Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, consider subscribing and sharing it with others who might need to hear that healing is possible even after the deepest betrayals. Thank you for bearing witness to my journey. And remember, your worth is not determined by others of you, but by the courage with which you protect your own well-being.